We'll talk about what's going on with the latest regarding Jimmy Butler and his trade request on today's live episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Have a special live show for you today. We're going to get to our audience poll of who deserves the most blame for the Jimmy Butler situation, some potential trade packages, and more of your questions. So if you're watching us live on YouTube here on a Friday afternoon, start getting those questions in on the comment section. We'll get to as many of them as we can towards the end on this bonus episode. But David, I want to start with these Jimmy Butler next team odds, which I find usually pretty fascinating. This comes courtesy of Jimmy Shapiro, who likes to send these out from Bet Online to various email addresses. Jimmy Butler's
Before we
next.
get to that, yeah, we talked about in yesterday's episode, like, needing some time, the proverbial sleeping on it to process this. Are you any more comfortable with the idea of like what's happened since yesterday? Because I sure as hell am not. Like, it's
So
just,
I'm glad you asked
very
about
overwhelming.
this. It was overwhelming, and I am two things on this show, and I sometimes admittedly struggle to be those two
Balancing.
things, to wear these two different hats. I'm a Miami Heat fan, and I want to be open about that. I want the best for this team. And I'm also a working reporter and somebody who's been doing that for a while now. And I get excited for two different reasons sometimes. So last night, in the craze of this Jimmy Butler stuff, nobody knew that he was going to make this trade request, essentially, in this post-game press conference, and that this ESPN story was going to come, and then all the fallout that ended up happening was going to come. And so the reporter part of me was invigorated and excited. I got the zoomies after that because I'm like, I don't know what to do. I stayed up until 2:30 in the morning writing columns and doing things in the trade machine and just trying to figure all this stuff out. Might have had a couple of glasses of wine to try to cool myself off. And that part of me gets, I think, energized by all of it, the reporter part of me, because it's exciting and it's news and it's breaking, and we're right here in front of it covering it. And I think after I slept on it, the fan part of me kind of kicked in. I woke up kind of bummed out.
Yeah.
Like, I have seen this coming. I have been telling everybody, this is coming, guys. I didn't know it was going to happen quite this way, but I just felt like there was no world where Jimmy Butler of the Miami Heat could go on. The tensions were too high. The relationship between Jimmy and the organization, I had thought was fractured beyond repair even before last night. But it is a little bit of a bummer for it to actually be playing out now. Because again, the reporter part of me is looking at the stuff in front of me and being like, this is probably what's going to happen. And then and that's the analysis and the reporting part of it. But then when it actually kind of happens, and yeah, Jimmy Butler is not traded yet, but this is almost the worst part of it, right? Is like, oh, your star player who has guided you through one of these great eras of Miami Heat basketball no longer wants to be here. That's the emotional burn, right?
Yep.
Like, the exciting part is actually when he gets traded. That's like, oh, we got this thing back, and now we can analyze that. Maybe there's something that we can look forward to. But this is sort of oh, you just filed the divorce papers, and I'm not even on the dating apps yet. This part sucks. And that's sort of how I woke up, was a little bit of like, oh, it's going to end like this, huh? And that part was a bummer. I kind of woke up with that feeling. How about you?
Yep. No, same. I don't know if I necessarily felt that kind of buzz of the reporting yet. I know that there's news to get into and news to process and news to break down. And that's a job that I love doing. And like, as you said, we've been doing for a long time now. but I don't know that I'm ready to get to that point. Right now, I'm still very much in the whole human aspect of this, and disappointed that it's played out this way, because I like I said in yesterday's show, like I loved Jimmy's first season here. I remember a full 2 years before Jimmy wound up in Miami talking about what a perfect fit Jimmy would be in Miami. And you can recall this because you were still
Yeah.
co-hosting with me at the time. And it was just like, I was really gung-ho about it. This was after one brief conversation with him when he was with the Timberwolves, and just talking to him in the locker room one-on-one at like 8:30 in the morning, because they really screwed over every reporter that was there covering them for shoot around. They decided to have their pregame, their availability before shoot around, which was scheduled for
Some
9:30.
teams do that. That's so strange. Never understood that.
Yeah, there was nobody there. It was me
Yeah.
and not a single Minnesota beat reporter, because obviously traveling from Minnesota to Orlando at the time, not exactly an easy trip to make, but whatever. That's besides the point. Talking to Jimmy, like just seeing him and the intensity with which he spoke about the work and putting in the effort. And we had seen his career in Chicago and everything he'd blossomed into, and thinking, man, this guy is such an ideal fit for Miami. And loving Jimmy's personality. Like right now, it's easy to kind of view him as an abrasive personality and very much an individual and unusual and stuff like that. But I love that dry sarcasm. I love that humor, that kind of wry smile that breaks across his face when he knows he's kind of trolling us a little bit. Like those kinds of things. I like that. You know, he is very much a unique player in today's NBA landscape, which is something that you and I both appreciate, because there are so many guys that just kind of spit out responses ad nauseum. They're kind of rehearsed. They're coached up by their trainers or whatever media people they have working with them or with their teams, that kind of give them the easy how to handle interviews for dummies, you know, that kind of handbook. They've been,
and they're afraid of causing a stir, and so they say nothing. And Jimmy Butler has never been afraid of causing a stir.
Exactly. And so that's something that you can appreciate. And you know, aside from all that, basketball was fun. Like there were moments there over the last 5.5 years which were really fun. Like maybe the regular seasons were a doldrum and very very unfortunate to watch, but there were a lot of great playoff moments there, from the bubble to the finals run to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they had Boston Celtics fans sweating. I mean, Celtics fans are gloating today, but their sphincters have been awfully tight over the past 5 years, knowing Jimmy was in South Florida. So, I mean, I don't think that's the fact that that's going to end. You know, that's just one thing that they'll be able to all of a sudden crawl out from whatever roach-infested place they live in to say, we knew it all along. We were never really scared of you guys, even when they were totally scared of Miami at the whole time. But anyway, it was a good era. It was a really fun era. I'm not ready to kind of write a eulogy just yet, but we're heading there, and it's pretty obvious. And I think that's kind of where my head is at right now.
So, all right. So before then we even get to the next team for Jimmy Butler, I think we're kind of hitting on this now. We covered so much of how we got here on yesterday's episode, and I don't necessarily want to go down that path again. If you haven't already watched yesterday's episode, us immediately reacting to all of that stuff, go ahead and check that out on the YouTube page and in your podcast feed. But I tweeted this out with my eyes closed to the Locked On Heat Twitter account. Who deserves more blame? And I made it a binary, one or the other. I made it on purpose. Jimmy Butler or Pat Riley. And who deserves more blame? I think everybody deserves some blame in it getting to this point. Who, in your opinion, deserves more blame? 60% of our audience said Pat Riley. 40% said Jimmy Butler.
Interesting.
I'm interested in that also because it feels like a majority of Heat fans believe that the front office let Jimmy Butler down, but also that a majority of the fan base is ready to move on from Jimmy Butler. And maybe reluctantly so, but have sort of accepted where it is that the Heat are at in their fate. And especially now that Jimmy Butler has essentially said, I don't want to be here and I'd rather play for 29 other teams than this one, it makes it a little bit easier to be like, well, okay, I guess we could break up now. But that part is surprising. Go ahead.
How much of a factor do you think it is that Miami didn't build a team around Jimmy Butler, wasn't able to secure that deal? Because to me, I don't think that's a factor at all. And I think this is fans projecting their frustration with Pat, their frustration with the front office and their inability to get that superstar. But I don't think Jimmy had any concerns about it. And had they offered him the extension and maybe not made those comments publicly in Pat Riley's press conference, I don't think Pat Riley. I'm sorry. I don't think Jimmy Butler would have requested a trade. I think he'd be happy to be here and just continue to carry this team and be able to win 45 to 48 wins and during the regular season and maybe make a playoff push and see what happens. I just so many people are saying, of course Jimmy wants out here. They didn't build a team around it. They didn't get Dame. They didn't get KD. I don't think that's a factor at all. I don't think Jimmy gives a damn. I think to me this is pretty much about to me from Jimmy's perspective, it's disrespect and the things that Pat said, which I totally get, and then the disrespect that comes with not being offered a great deal of money that he wanted. And aside from that, I don't think there's anything else. I don't think
you're right. If Pat Riley would have if the Miami Heat and Pat Riley would have come out and offered Jimmy Butler the 2-year, $113 million extension on day one, like they offered Bam Adebayo his maximum extension, we're not talking about this. You're exactly right. Now, the issue of has the Heat's front office let Jimmy Butler down? That is an issue. That is a fan issue, and it's a debate that we can have and all these things. It is separate than why Jimmy Butler wants out. Jimmy Butler just told you in this report, I can go to 29 other teams and I can make them a contender. I don't need nobody, is what he's saying. And so I agree with you. It's similar, David, to yesterday him pointing the finger at Eric Spoelstra, being like, Eric Spoelstra saying we want you to be kind of a point guard, and Jimmy Butler being like, I don't want to be a point guard. I haven't played that way in 2 or 3 years. If my scoring is down, it's because my field goal attempts are down and my usage is down. I'm like, who are you kidding? Why are we all of a sudden acting like this guy's been a volume scorer and all of a sudden is being asked to be more of a facilitator? This guy has been more than happy to facilitate for most of these games. He always comes out and says, I play the game the right way. It's not about points for me. I wanted to play. And all of a sudden he's pointing the finger at Eric Spoelstra. The point is, it's always been about the money. It's never been about anything other than the money. And that's it. Now, if you want to blame the front office for not giving him the money,
that's fine.
I don't see a way that you argue with that. Now, you can argue that they should or shouldn't have, but the reason we're here is because they didn't pay him, right? I don't think you can pay Jimmy Butler. I don't think that there was a world that you could have offered him that extension. I don't think that there was a world that if he would have come back for more years on a smaller annual salary, perhaps. I just was always dubious that Jimmy Butler would accept anything less than the max from the Miami Heat. Now, maybe you can accept less than the max from somewhere else where you don't have that history and the sort of the emotional baggage attached to it. But this is now at the point where the writing is on the wall. It's irreparable. We're heading towards a split here. But I thought it was interesting how many people were blaming the front office for this, and I don't know that they necessarily were wrong. I think you could argue that the Heat have not maximized the Jimmy Butler window. I think that's absolutely a fair criticism.
But I don't think that's what's pushing Jimmy out the door either. I think this probably could have been solved with a very frank and one-on-one conversation between Pat and Jimmy. Because that being called out publicly. I'm sorry?
Did that conversation involve a checkbook and a contract with a pen next to it?
Maybe. But even still, like I think the seeds were unfortunately sown in Pat's press conference and being called out. And I know, and I think this is what everybody's forgetting. And everybody thinks, oh, Pat called him out. Pat threw him under the bus, etc. Like Pat was standing up for players 2 through 15 in that locker room. That's what is being lost in this. The nuance of there is that why Pat said Jimmy should shut the hell up, and he said it as directly as he did, is because Jimmy wasn't there on the floor. Keep your mouth shut. Because the guys that were out there, they tried. They were available, and you weren't. You weren't there to help them beat the Celtics. And so to say that had you been out there, you would have beaten the Celtics, that's disrespectful to Bam Adebayo, Haywood Highsmith, Tyler Hero, and on and on. And maybe that's what's kind of being lost in here. Maybe Jimmy didn't mean it that way because, Jimmy is arrogant as well. You'd want him to be because that's what a superstar and a star player in the NBA should be. And yet maybe Jimmy didn't realize. Again, like whatever TMZ reporter or whomever it was caught him on the sidelines. I think it was at the Miami Grand Prix at the time. He was a little inebriated and got him to kind of open up about this and say this. Really screwed the pooch for Miami here, because it was.
Oh, I like this. This is a good angle. Blame TMZ. Blame the media. Why not?
Absolutely.
Let's get in on it.
Absolutely.
Everybody else is doing it.
They asked Jimmy. Yeah, they asked Jimmy. what he would have done had it been the Celtics, and Jimmy a little buzzed on watching there, was hurt, was like, yeah, I would have kicked their ass had it been out there. And next thing you know, that sets off Pat.
I don't know how much I blame Jimmy Butler for that, only because I would be a hypocrite because I was also pretty buzzed at the Miami Grand Prix, and there's literally videos on our Locked On Heat Instagram account of me recapping the Grand Prix, more than a couple of cocktails in. I don't know. I don't know how much I care about having the did the Heat let Jimmy Butler down? Did the Heat not maximize the championship window? That feels more later. But blame Tobin for asking the question to Pat. 100%, 100% to Tobin. We could 100% blame Tobin.
Well, how about this? Because I think a lot of things also, as Heat fans are kind of processing this, so many people are kind of turning on Pat in the front office. But would they still have this same kind of vitriol and perspective if it hadn't happened in 2016 with Dwayne? And I think that's created like a PTSD on like forcing out your franchise player. Like within a span of 10 years, it's 10 years now, you forced out LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, and now Jimmy Butler.
Pat Riley has a pattern. And if this was wives, I mean, this is who was the guy that kept beheading all of his wives? King Henry VIII? This is King Henry. He's beheading all of his superstars,
like,
looking for the next one. Yeah, looking for the next one.
And Boleyn, I'm looking at you.
You're next.
Your free agency here. I get it. This is it was interesting because I was watching Inside the NBA with Charles Barkley, and he's like, he pushed out Dwayne Wade. And it's like, yeah, we've been talking about this the whole time. And I mean, that's just a common consensus. Like Pat, Shaq was there offering his perspective as a Heat player. And Pat said, I'd love to pay the money that you'd want, but we're not gonna.
And look, so as heartbreaking as the Dwayne Wade thing was, and for a lot of people, this Jimmy Butler thing is, the only time you could really was, I don't think the Heat are wrong, and I don't think Pat Riley is wrong for not wanting to pay Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
not the max money. And if Jimmy is out here saying it's max or nothing, then I guess it's nothing, because you can't pay him that kind of money going into his age 37, 38 season. Like with this roster, the way it's constructed, you can't do it. And that's not necessarily Jimmy's fault, but you also you got to deal with the facts that you have, the hand that you're dealt. And that's sort of what the Heat were dealing with. With Dwayne Wade even, man, like had Dwayne been being paid $40 million when he was a sixth man coming off the bench, that feels a lot different than Dwayne Wade coming back and playing for the minimum. Doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's part of it too. As heartbreaking as it was to see Dwayne walk in 2016, it's hard to argue that wasn't the right decision even at the time to not pay him all that money. The only time I think Pat Riley ever really screwed it up with a superstar, in terms of the very black and white, like he's gone or he's staying here, I think he could have handled things a little bit more gracefully in all of these situations.
Absolutely.
But kind of challenging LeBron the way that he did,
yeah.
I still don't know. I still don't know much. I don't know how much that really played. That might have been, I already know LeBron's walking out the door because he has this heart draw back to Cleveland, this heartache that he needs to go return home. Maybe that was, and him saying you don't have the guts was like a last ditch Hail Mary to try to bring him back.
Desperation.
But, yeah. So it's hard to really tell here. I do think, and the thing that I think, it's not just Pat Riley. I think that there was a wedge in that locker room.
Yeah.
I think Jimmy Butler was upset that Bam got the extension and he didn't. I think that played a factor in this too. And maybe that also falls on the front office. But the fact that the Heat came out day one and offered Bam the maximum extension that they could offer him, and Bam day one signed that extension. And Jimmy Butler is sitting here being like, you're giving this guy who's been my sidekick this entire time the extension. And I've been the guy, I've been the number one option. I've been playoff Jimmy. I've been the one guiding us through this whole thing. And you're not even going to talk to me about the extension? Like, we're not even going to sit at a table and negotiate? Like, we're not even going to do that?
Yeah.
I think that rubbed Jimmy Butler the wrong way. I also think it kind of put a wedge between the team's two-star players, between Jimmy and Bam.
Yeah.
I think the fact that Bam has had to be in front of the media answering questions about Jimmy Butler, about every day, Bam Adebayo, good soldier, Heat culture, all that stuff. and is willing to answer the questions of the media and wear the team captain thing and do all the team captain stuff that he talks about. I have mine actually right in front of me. I can't reach it here. But
the disease of more, Wes. The disease of more has broken the team apart. Whether it was individually or as you're pointing out to the fact that one player got it and the other player did it, bam, next thing you know, it all implodes.
So there's a wedge created in that locker room. And now this is the part where it gets so it's so tense in there that I feel like you have to move on. And I don't know that maybe I'm so close to it that I'm not seeing the big picture and I'm not seeing the greater perspective. You have people that weren't in that locker room yesterday saying, no, be patient. Don't trade him. You know, the return is nothing right now. You can't trade him for nothing. Just wait until the summer or whatever. I'm like, you weren't standing in that locker room. You weren't around that team last night. I don't think it's fair to Bam. I don't think it's fair to Tyler Hero. I don't think it's fair to anybody else in that locker room if this situation plays out. And it's not like Bam's 27, Tyler Hero's 25. They're right in the thick of their prime. It's not fair to ask them to waste a half season, to waste essentially an entire season on this Jimmy Butler thing. I say that recognizing you literally can't just trade Jimmy Butler for nothing. Like it can't just be like, I'm not saying accept whatever offer. I'm not accepting Bradley Beal. Like but you have to go from, if you're the Miami Heat, open to listening to offers to actively engaged with the trade market and understanding when you do that, the value that you could have gotten for Jimmy Butler last summer or even last month before all of this stuff hit the fan is not going to be what you're going to get for him now. And all of that is a sunk cost, and you can't live in that world anymore. And you just have to try to take care of your own and do what's best and recognize, hey, you strung it out as long as you could. You really did. Even though you had opportunities to pivot, you didn't. And maybe that's admirable. But the cost associated with not parting with Jimmy Butler earlier is this, that you're probably not going to get like value back from him for anything. I want to get to that list of Jimmy Butler's next team. Before we get to that, a quick break so that we can hear from our friends at FanDuel. Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thanks again for tuning into this live episode on a Friday afternoon of Locked On Heat. If you're watching live on YouTube, leave your questions in the comments section. We're going to try to get to as many of them as possible. Even if you want, there's so many comments there. Do like a big, like all in caps question, and then get to your question. That way, maybe we can recognize them a little bit easier and you kind of signal to us this is a question that you want us to answer. And to everybody else watching afterwards on YouTube or listening and following along on your favorite podcast app, we do appreciate the support in these wild times. There's going to be a lot of people tuning in. Go ahead.
Before we move in, sorry, no, because people are saying, people are going to make this and they're going to take your comments and look at this as a Jimmy versus Bam thing. And I don't think that's fair. It's not about one player or being better than the other or not. I think it was pretty clear that Jimmy has been the best player on this team for over the last 5.5 seasons, and that's not the issue here. The issue is Bam getting his extension, and to that I say his career earnings, $105 million thus far. Jimmy's career earnings, $264 million. That's the difference here, is that Jimmy's already gotten his money. And he's asking for more. This is a player who will be making $52 million next year had he done nothing. Had he just shown up at some point in some regard over the next 50-something games of the season, and for the next, he would be getting another $70 million plus whatever contract he could get after that. But he didn't want that. He wanted an extension. And again, I'm not begrudging that because an NBA player's life is short in terms of their careers, and they've got to make whatever money they can. I don't begrudge that. But the issue, if he's going to be having some kind of problem with Bam getting his extension versus Jimmy getting his extension, and if fans are going to be looking at that as a Jimmy versus Bam sort of situation, the front office was 100% correct in awarding Bam based on his potential, because he is only 27, not pushing 37. And that's the difference. They're paying him for what he will be, not for what he was, which is the difference between Bam and Jimmy in terms of their contract extensions.
We've seen this happen. The Lakers with Kobe Bryant, they couldn't do anything after they signed him to the reward extension. He was too old to. He tears his Achilles. They give him that big contract, and they're stuck with it for years. And it took them a decade more to climb out of that. Like, not until LeBron just decided, I just kind of want to live in Los Angeles. Were they able to climb out of it? That was it. Had it been any other franchise in any other city, that doesn't work. And Miami, fortunately, Miami is in a very similar position as LA, where they said people want to be here. So that said, you can't just give the guy the contract for what was done. Don Draper, right? That's what the money was for. The thank yous, the nostalgia, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. That's what that money was for. We already paid you for that stuff. We're not going to pay you more for what you already did, because you put too much on the roster that way, or on the payroll rather. It should not be. You're absolutely right. It's not Bam versus Jimmy. When I say that there's a wedge in the locker room, these guys were not actively fighting. They have a working relationship. Okay, they're not best friends off the court, but they have a working relationship, and that was not a thing in the locker room. There was not an issue in the locker room. But I think Jimmy Butler was upset about the money part of it, that they went out and paid Bam and didn't pay him. And that's an understandable human response. So, do we want to do the next team odds now?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I realized now we went off on several tangents. No knock on Jimmy.
No, it was better.
Fine work he does. Yeah.
Well, we can go in two directions here, but I want to do the well, actually, we'll hold the Jimmy Butler next team odds. We're supposed to be the first thing. We're gonna just tease it all the way to the end. There's a couple options here now. If you're Miami, you could trade him before the February 6th deadline, or you can wait to trade him until the summer. And those are really the two options. I guess the third option would be, obviously, you wait until the summer and then he just walks away in free agency and it's not your problem anymore. And then he tests the market. Maybe he signs a max deal in Brooklyn, which is the only team that can really create that. And by the way, that keeps getting reported that Brooklyn is the only team that has max cap space. Houston can decline Fred VanVleet's team option, trade one player away or waive one player and create quite a bit of salary cap space pretty easily if they don't make any major moves between now and the trade deadline. So that part has been a little lost for the nuance, I think, in some of the reporting in this. So there's a world where Jimmy can just walk into Houston's cap space.
Yeah.
And so that would be the third option, is you're not facilitating the sign and trade over the summer, and you're just letting him walk, and you're just washing your hands of it. And you get nothing back, very much the way that the Clippers got nothing back for Paul George. Because they just said, well, we have a sign and trade option with Golden State. We actually prefer what we could get in free agency over what we can get from Golden State. So we're going to go and do that. Philadelphia, have fun with Paul George. So those are really those three options. If the cool thing about the sign and trade option, again, going back to what Golden State did when they signed and traded Klay Thompson to Dallas, they created a trade exception that they were able to then use to acquire Buddy Hield, who's been helpful for them, right? Mm-hmm. A Jimmy Butler trade exception, this is from ESPN's Bobby Marks. If they were to sign and trade Jimmy Butler into another team's cap space or just into another team's salary cap, they could create a trade exception of more than $40 million. And now that's a lot different than just letting him walk away for nothing, having a mid-level exception of about $14 million and about $13 million of cap space. Because if you do that, you would still have that $14 million mid-level exception. You would still have that biannual exception of $5 million, which the Heat are going to have either way. And then a $40 million trade exception. Now, to take that play, you could, and that what, so just to explain what a trade exception is, that is the same as like a mid-level exception. It's this one-time thing that you get that you can use, and it works as the matching salary needed. So it's just like this little other cap slot that just exists on your books, and you could absorb a player into it. So with the mid-level exception, you often see teams sign a player into that exception, even if they're over their salary cap, right? With a trade exception, you could trade a player into that You can't sign a player into a trade exception, but you could have a player traded into that exception. So essentially somebody new would occupy Jimmy Butler's cap slot on Miami's payroll. Now, that would push them very close, and it doesn't have to be the full thing. It could just be a portion of it. It could be 10% of it, 20% of it, 100% of it. But there's the potential for that now to get basically a max level player in a trade, not in free agency, in a trade. It would push you back up towards the second apron. There would be all these things that come along with it. But if the player was worth it, then maybe it would be something that Miami would consider.
Yeah. I think to the point you made to start off this topic, I think trading him ASAP is the right call. I think it's the thing that you need to do, because it's going to be just a difficult situation. You want to kind of end this as quickly as possible. And I know that you have to do your due diligence, but it's not to say that they haven't already done their due diligence. I don't think there's going to be some wave of suitors for Jimmy Butler. And the fact that now maybe you have an expanded list that includes 29 or 24 other teams other than the first row of contenders that he had listed or that were reportedly in his interest, as far as Phoenix, Houston, etc. Like, I don't think that was never Miami's priority. Miami didn't go, oh, well, we better find the right deal for Phoenix, because that's what Jimmy wants. They don't give a damn. They're trading him. Like, you want to accommodate him if they can. And if you get something good back, that's fine. But that's not your priority if you're this front office. Your priority is getting the best deal available. And now that that's opened up to 29 other teams, okay, I don't think that changes much either. Like, we talked about this in yesterday's show. Like, do you trade him to an Eastern Conference opponent that you're going to see him 2 to 4 times a year? Probably not. Are you more willing to trade him to the West? Probably. And then who in the West is going to be able to send something to Miami?
Would you prefer to send him somewhere east, or just make this, or just have this be awkward for the rest of the year and let him walk?
I don't care. To me, I don't care. Like, I think that's overblown. Like, I mean, this idea, first of all, he's probably going to be hurt on 2 of the 4 occasions that you trade him to. So if you could trade him to a divisional rival and you get the best package available, he's probably not going to be there for half of them. I know he's going to start off with the whole, oh, I got that date circled on my calendar thing. What's his record against Minnesota, bub? Like, I mean, that's just, he hasn't been there. So I'm not too concerned about that. You trade him to wherever you can get the best deal up for your team. And that's just the reality. I mean, again, it's not a knock on Jimmy. I mean, it's also the reality of where he's been over the last 5.5 years. And you can appreciate everything he's done and still love the person and the player and everything else, and then also point out to very obvious warts in his personality and his availability, and the fact that that's probably why he's not getting paid the way he'd want to get paid. And if that's the case, he becomes somebody else's problem, and you have to deal him as soon as possible so that he is no longer your problem. And so I think that's the first thing to do. And in terms of what you'd want back, I would rank. Okay. Because to me, I'm thinking, like, a lot of fans are saying, oh, you got to get a superstar back. Ain't no superstar coming back. Like, maybe this is just a comment, and maybe this is just all fun and games or partially trolling. So hard to tell online nowadays. But you're not getting Ant Edwards. You're not getting De'Aaron Fox. There's options there, unrealistic and probably not worth talking about, other than, in some kind of fantasy realm. But in terms of what you'd want back, is it draft picks? Is it roster flexibility and cap space? Or is it, a combination of players that will help you win now? Like, where do you rank those 3 options? Because I think a lot of people are kind of in that realm of thinking about this. And to me, my priority is probably cap space, because you have to move Jimmy and you have to move forward to that next phase of Heat basketball and whatever that entails. And the best way of going that route is by getting that kind of cap space, because I don't think a draft pick, this team's never going to be bad enough to draft a superstar. And that being said, I don't think tanking is realistic. I don't think they're ever going to be a top 5 draft team. They haven't been one for a long time. And yes, you got lucky once with Dwayne Wade. Michael Beasley didn't pan out, and I think that's just
no. But and that team that drafted Dwayne Wade stunk, right? And this team doesn't stink. Like, they're. I think with Bam and Tyler Hero and the supporting cast that we have right now, this is a play-in team. It's not a championship contender team. But, like, to your point, it's still a middling team. They're not bad enough to tank. To answer your question, I said this before. If you trade a superstar, you better be at least getting a lottery ticket to potentially get a superstar back. And I don't think that that's happening for Miami anymore. I think that they could have. I think that there was a window there in December where maybe that could have happened. Maybe you're getting Jonathan Kuminga. We were debating Jonathan
Yeah.
Kuminga,
Yes.
and that might not even be an option anymore.
Right.
Like that was a luxury to be even debating him now with all things considered. If you had traded him over the summer, teams like Golden State, the New York Knicks, before the Knicks made the deal for Mikal Bridges, you were probably getting draft picks back, decent salary filler, stuff like that could have helped you. That's not on the table anymore. And so I'm curious to see what other front offices think of what Jimmy Butler did last night. I reached out to a couple of different people that I know, and mixed results. But when it boils down to it, last night's press conference is going to have very little to do with whatever happens for whatever team acquires him. At the end of the day, it's still all right. It's Jimmy Butler. He's a good player when he's engaged. There's the extracurriculars that you are, and the attitude and the way that he carries himself that you just know is going to be something in your locker room, and you just have to ask, this is a very specific personality. Is this one that, are we going to be more like Miami and we can withstand this for most of the time? Or are we going to be like Minnesota where it lasts about 3 hours and he wants to get out of here? And you have to ask yourself that, okay, what kind of culture, organizational culture do we have? And do we think we can house this? And then there's the issue of him being 35 and needing a new contract. And do you want to be the team that has to pay him that contract? If you're a win now team, I could see how you would talk yourself into it. I could totally see it. He's a good player. He's the kind of player that could put you over the top for the right team.
You make this point now, and I can honestly say I hadn't even considered this. Like all the things that Miami has just kind of been like, you know what? We're not going to make a big deal out of it for the sake of the team, for the sake of their public perception. They have not said a word, not one word in 5.5 seasons about Jimmy Butler and his personality and how difficult that is to match. It's not that he's a prima donna, which I hate that term. It's just he might be high maintenance. And that's fine in saying that. A lot of superstars in this league are high maintenance. Jimmy is absolutely one of them. Not a lot of teams can absorb a player like that. Miami might be the team best suited for that of any in the league. And we're seeing this end badly 5.5 years down the road. But I don't know. I'm almost scared to bring this up because, I mean, it's not like NBA GMs are tuning into our show as much as I'd love to think so. But at the same time, like there is a cause for concern. If I was a fan of any other team and you make that move, brother, you got a very limited window there because the wheels are going to come off and they're going to come off badly, and it's going to end badly.
I think front offices know that they have a limited window, and heck, I mean, you can give him the 2-year extension and just say, all right, it's just going to be 3 years. I think if you were to sign Jimmy Butler to the 2-year extension, he'd be happy. Whatever team trades for him, if they trade for him before the deadline, they can offer him, I'm pretty sure. I should probably check that first. I'm pretty sure they can offer the extension because they assume Jimmy's bird rights.
Right.
So maybe it's not the full 113, but I think it would be because Miami's not the team that drafted Jimmy Butler. So you don't have those weird team that drafted rules that exist now. So yeah, you could sign him to an extension regardless because he's in the final year of a contract before the player option. I don't know. I that's the part where I'm trying to get at here is whatever value you thought you could have gotten for Jimmy Butler, if you're the Heat front office and you are seriously like a gamer in the chair leaning forward, like we're going to now engage in Jimmy Butler trade talks seriously with the intent of trading him. Whatever you thought you could have gotten before is not going to be what you're going to get for him now. I don't see it. Now, I think it always surprises me. I think there will be a market for him. I think there are teams desperate enough to say, you know what? Let's just do it. We got a chance to maybe win a championship. And then however this thing burns in the end will be worth it, right? Because we got the hardware to show for it. Jimmy Butler's next team odds. Golden State Warriors. 1-2 odds. Houston Rockets. Second best odds. Dallas. Then Denver. Surprisingly, Oklahoma City. Brooklyn. Phoenix. The LA Clippers. The Sacramento Kings and the Lakers. I'll finish there. There's a few more teams on this list, but the Lakers at 16-1 odds and the Warriors all the way at the top at 1-2 odds.
how is Oklahoma City? Like, I don't even think we've explored that, but I know that Pat and Sam Presti have about as close a relationship between two front offices as you can possibly have in today's NBA. And given the fact that they have too many draft picks to even use them properly, and they already have the best team in the league, and they're not acquiring this treasure trove of draft picks to get any superstar because they've already got one and they've already got an MVP player there. They've already got the great supporting cast. Could you envision, because I didn't even think about Oklahoma City, but could you envision a world where Sam Presti goes all in now, to hell with Jimmy and the extension? They'll get to that when they get to it. But going all in now and offering, I don't know, 3-4 picks, whatever it might take, and sending those to Miami for Jimmy in order to win now? Because this is a franchise.
No.
Why not?
You're the best team by 5 games in the Western Conference. You're the prohibitive favorite to come out of the West. You're young. You're talented. Everything like this is risk reward. And I think the risk of putting Jimmy Butler on the Thunder roster with a team that is so close knit, a team that has very much like the way it's been described to me by people who cover that team, it's like a college program.
Yeah.
Like they might as well be dorming together, like all these guys. Jimmy ain't that cat.
No, I know.
Jimmy's getting the Airbnb on the road. He's not that guy. He does his own thing in the locker room, and that's fine, and it's worked for him. I don't know that it's the right fit for Oklahoma City. And like I said, that's the risk, and the reward is still okay. So we're still the favorites in the Western Conference. It's like they're not the team that needs that thing to get them over the top. I actually look at the teams behind them. Like they've got Memphis on these odds, 25-1. Yeah. That's the team to me that makes more sense of like, you're one more piece away. Golden State, the Lakers. These are the teams that are like, you're a piece of. I think Phoenix is desperate to get Jimmy Butler. They just have a really hard time of making it happen. Bradley Beal is not coming back for Jimmy Butler. The Heat will not tie up their future cap. Like you asked me before, what do I want out of a Jimmy Butler trade? Cap flexibility first and foremost. If you can get a pick back, great. Maybe a couple of role players who can help you now and maybe in the long term that you can re-sign. Maybe. Like we could talk about it. But the first thing that I want is cap flexibility, because now it's time to clear the books, kind of get them in order, create flexibility and an opportunity to go out and get that next star. I don't know that you're going to trade Jimmy Butler for the next star directly, but whatever you do trade Jimmy Butler for, and however the framework of it works out, you need it to be able to help you facilitate that next trade for a star player. And that's just where my priority is. And that means you can't tie up your books with Bradley Beal or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, things have cooled off. My feeling is that there's probably going to be a handful of teams that are able to accommodate him, and that's not going to change.
What teams can't? Well, let's just talk about it. What teams do we think can? Oh, and one last thing on Oklahoma City. I had this thought. If Miami does trade Jimmy Butler, you know who I do think Presti calls Pat Riley about? And this is not reporting, and I just don't. I'm just completely speculating here. I wonder if Oklahoma City would call about Tyler Hero and just be like, "Are you guys blowing it up all the way, or just a little, or is it just a Jimmy Butler thing?" Because Tyler Hero would be a great fit in Oklahoma City. That's a team desperate for real, legitimate, scary shooting, and Tyler Hero could provide that. And I don't think I don't know how many draft picks it would take for the Heat, like 5, 6. Like I think they love Tyler Hero with what he's doing right now.
Alex Caruso in a second rounder gets it done.
But I think Golden State is interesting. They have shown the ability to withstand, to house and let Draymond Green flourish.
Different too. It's like Draymond's their guy. KD is as difficult a personality.
Kevin Durant was a whole thing. I think Golden State could. I think Golden State has. I think they've got the chutzpah. I think they could say, you know what, we could do this too. I think they do. I don't know if who knows whether it works. I don't know why
you're Jewish and you keep pronouncing it chutzpah. Isn't it chutzpah? Isn't that
chutzpah? But I don't want to. It feels like that's going.
You don't want to. Okay, you don't want to Jew it up. I get it. All right.
I don't want to Jew it up. Yeah, no, I think Golden State's got the chutzpah. I do. But Houston with Ime is interesting. Raphael Stone is out there, their general manager, saying that they've
worked together. Him and Pat have worked together. Yeah,
they have. I'm not ruling it out, even though the GM is out here on radio shows ruling it out. Like, why would a GM do that? When I hear a GM take that strong of a stance on anything, my antenna goes up.
Yeah.
Similarly to like when Pat Riley releases a statement, we're not trading Jimmy Butler, and I'm like, oh, they might be trading Jimmy Butler. I could see Denver doing it.
Yes.
Like, again, I like this is absent the
Russell
mechanics of how it gets done, but like with they've
Russell
already
Westbrook
done the
is one of
Russell
the
Westbrook
success
thing.
stories of the league. Like, he's one of the best stories of the league this season, and that's a guy that nobody wanted, and he's on a vet min, and like he's turned into a really solid player. Like they're 9-2, 10-2, and his role as a starter. Like, if look, I mean, Michael Malone is a hell of a coach. I think this team is Jokic's team. They've got their quiet individuals. They've got the way they do things. Westbrook is fiery, but I think Jimmy would go in there and add like a lot of add a dimension to that team. You know, like the only thing is that he's not necessarily the kind of shooter that I think would flourish alongside those guys. Like, you've already got Westbrook kind of driving to the rim. You've got the offense running through Jokic. He's not the catch and shoot guy. He's not Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who was a great fit there, who's more of a catch and shoot guy. So I think
they would be bringing in Jimmy for his defense and for his basketball IQ. And it would be totally like, we already are last in the league in 3-point attempts, and we're going to go even further in that direction. And we're just going to dominate in the paint with cuts and high IQ stuff. But yeah, I don't know. And also at the same time, they would have to trade Michael Porter Jr. in that deal. So that would be their best floor spacer coming back. I don't really see Denver going in that direction for whatever it's worth. I think Phoenix, obviously, with just the lack of self-awareness, would just be like, yep, we want Jimmy Butler. That's our star. Just add another one to the group if we could. I don't see the Clippers wanting to go in that direction. I could be wrong, but after the whole Kawhi plus Paul George thing, I don't know that they want to make it Kawhi plus Jimmy Butler. I think they're sort of looking forward to being done with all of it. Yeah. That said, they could trade for Jimmy and align his contract with Kawhi's pretty easily. I don't know. I could talk myself into it. I don't know that they would go in that direction. The Sacramento Kings thing is interesting to me. Right now, I don't think that they would trade De'Aaron Fox for Jimmy Butler. But how bad does De'Aaron Fox have to make it? And how much does that owner still want to compete and look at Jimmy Butler and say, well, if Fox is already on his way out of here, we could get Jimmy plus one of these young guys. Call it Jaime Jaquez, right? California native. That's why I throw him in there.
Yeah, sure.
Can we get Jimmy and Jaime, and we're kind of doing both things where we're competing in the short term, but also getting a good young prospect back who we like? And all we have to do is send De'Aaron Fox and like Kevin Huerter's contract or something like that. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think they do that now, but if you're the Heat, maybe that's there's a reason to be patient at least until February on this thing to just see if De'Aaron Fox kind of pulls a Jimmy Butler and kind of makes it messy for Sacramento and kind of forces their hand.
Yeah, I don't know that he has that kind of equity built up where he can force that. I mean, like, he might make a stink about it, but I don't think he's necessarily wired that way either.
He hasn't been so far. Yeah.
No, yeah. But this is how villains are born, right? This could be his villain origin story.
His origin story.
You know,
born out of the ashes of Jimmy Butler burning the.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler was a model citizen in Chicago until he wasn't, and then it's like, oh man, that was Jimmy Butler, huh? So we'll see. Maybe this is the first of many future divorces for De'Aaron Fox. Who knows?
We got an email. Billy from Cleveland has Billy from Cleveland, an OG. These are this is his 3-team trade that brings De'Aaron Fox to Miami. The Heat get De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Huerter.
Yep.
Also Kuzma and Jonas Valanciunas.
Nice.
The Kings get Terry Rozier, Duncan Robinson, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Malcolm Brogdon, and Rashawn Holmes. The Wizards get Jimmy Butler, Alec Burks, Khalil Ware, and DeMar DeRozan.
Ooh, wait, the Wizards get DeRozan and Butler and Khalil Ware?
Huh. Yeah, this is the crazy. This would never happen. So there's just too many moving pieces. I don't even know if this is street legal. I have no idea. So it's just this is wild, and it's a fun like NC or NBA 2K type deal, but it would never happen in real life. The other one, he has Jimmy Butler going to Memphis. So the Heat get De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, John Conchar. The Kings get Terry Rozier, Duncan Robinson, Jaime, and Luke Kennard, and the Grizzlies get Butler. Again, not sure why the Kings are getting involved here. If the Grizzlies really want Jimmy Butler, I guess, yeah. I don't know. It feels that the Grizzlies really want Jimmy Butler. They could just trade Desmond Bane and Brandon Clark and be done with it. Or Marcus Smart, Brandon Clark, John Conchar, and some other contracts and just be done with it. So, I don't know. Interesting question from him. Cody from our Locked On Heat Insider program writes in, is trading Jimmy Butler the best move, or is letting him expire and finding a team willing to pay him better for the Heat long term? Or that just be more, or that just cause more problems throughout the second half of the season with an albatross in the room? We've basically already answered this, David, but you could just be clear about, you think trade him as soon as possible is, from what I gather, your stance?
I think so. I don't think things are going to get significantly better. Like, I don't think you're going to have enough time to kind of flesh out a increasingly better deal or more suitors. I don't think anybody between now and February or now and the summer, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference in terms of some team desperately wanting 35-old Jimmy Butler on the with the potential of having to sign him for $120 million. There's a very few number of teams that are willing to accept the personality, the contract demands, the age, just everything that comes with Jimmy Butler, and be willing to risk it. Like, you have to be a desperate franchise looking for a championship now. And that's why Houston's there, because they haven't won since the 90s. That's why Oklahoma City, a team that's never won a championship. Denver, if you want to maximize Nikola Jokic. I don't know. There aren't a lot of teams. And so it's either a team that's on the outs and is just like, well, let's take a flyer on Jimmy and see if we can pay him $120 million. I don't know that that's available. Like, we kind of talked about Charlotte, New Orleans. Is New Orleans, willing to kind of clear the decks and at least get a player in Jimmy Butler that they feel is more reliable than either Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram or anybody like that? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think they are either. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know that there's a lot of options.
Yeah.
And at this point, you might wind up having to take Bradley Beal.
No, you can't do that. You just, then you figure I would rather trudge along through the awkwardness than tie up your cap sheet. Like, really, like you acquire Bradley Beal, you are worse than you are now for 3 more years. I mean, you can't do that.
Yeah, it's tough.
$50 million a year with a no trade clause. You can't do it.
I get it.
Now, can you send him to Phoenix and send Bradley Beal to a third team? That gets a little bit more complicated, but that could be something that Miami explores. And that's what I'm saying. Instead of just being passive and being like, hey, we're open to listening to offers, you should be directly engaged in this. If you can help Phoenix find that third team. Pat Riley, Andy Ellsberg, and Adam Simon, the masters of all these multi-team deals. Phoenix doesn't have any experience doing this. Like, you can go out and maybe grease the wheels on that. That's something I would be looking at. Lewis writes in, what team out there is going to trade assets and give Jimmy the max extension? That's what you were just talking about. That's why I put this question up when you were talking about it. I still think Phoenix would do it. They have limited assets, but whatever they have, I think they would do it. They have like one future first rounder that they can maybe move. I think I'm not going to rule out Golden State.
Right.
That team is so up and down. And if there's a moment of desperation and right before the trade deadline, and they say, you know what? Let's just maximize Steph's window. The hell with everything else. I could see them.
You've won. Look, the team better than anybody. They've won 4 rings. Like, do they really need a 5th ring to just kind of say that?
No, but they are to your. They're all psychos, and I mean that with great respect.
Clay for that, then? Wouldn't they have kept Clay for that?
They determined that Clay wasn't good enough. I think that's. Okay. I think you're exactly. That's the point. Is they are ruthless in their pursuit of another championship, and that's why they let Clay walk.
All right, fair enough. If they think that Jimmy's going to be better than Clay in terms of what he can help for this team, and they feel like they want to get one more title, I'm trying to consider again teams that are that desperate and wanting to do that. Like,
I can also see Golden State being like, we don't want to deal with Jonathan Kuminga's next contract. So,
yeah, sure.
That might be it too. So I could see Golden State doing it, and then the Lakers. I have no idea how they would make a trade happen, but the Lakers seem desperate, and they're always involved in these things, just like Miami is. So maybe those are the teams. Last one here. David writes in, Ingram and Zion for Butler and Rozier. and this has always been about money, nothing more. It has always been about money. It's a great point, David. Both Davids, you made that point earlier today. I understand the Zion thing. We could imagine and dream, and you could talk me into it, and it would be interesting because when he's on the floor, he's one of the best players in the league, and there's no question about it. The problem is when he's on the floor, it's rare. It's rare occurrence. I would not do it after you've dealt with the Jimmy Butler on and off stuff, his injury concerns, and everything with the availability. I just don't know that you want to basically do the same thing with Zion. But Brandon Ingram, I've been a fan of his for a long time, but it's really hard to build a Brandon Ingram for Jimmy Butler deal. I tried doing it last night at 2:30 in the morning after 2 glasses of wine, and it's really difficult. And that's not just because of the wine. So if he can figure it out, they'd probably need a third team involved, but it would be difficult.
Yeah, maybe that's the one delay, the kind of the roadblock to all this is that, and Pat Riley certainly not afraid of thinking big, looking at multiple teams, maybe as much of as a 4-team trade to try and get something that everybody wants to every team involved. And that's probably what the obstacle is going to be.
And that could be that's like a month's worth of work, right?
Maybe,
like that's between now and the deadline, or longer.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think that's how this team operates. I think you kind of I think everybody's known that Jimmy was going to be traded at some point, but I think a lot of people kind of put their chips on the back burner knowing that it was going to happen in the summer. And that being the case, I think now everybody's going to catch a little bit of a buzz off this idea of like, oh, maybe we can get in on this deal. And because now things are heating up. And now, as you've pointed out, Miami's playing a little bit more desperately because they are no longer in the position of strength that they were in, say, maybe 3 weeks ago, a month ago, however long ago.
3 days ago.
And yeah, perhaps. So now Miami's in a little bit of a corner, and that's good because Pat Riley, like any cornered animal, is going to act as tough as he possibly can. But I think everybody involved is going to be motivated. I think you're going to have a lot of teams saying, well, let's get in on this. Let's see what we can do to help. Even if it's just in the past, and we've seen this, like a team with cap space saying, yeah, I'll take X player and absorb him into cap space. Got to give me a couple seconds to go along with it. But, we can make that happen. We'll be partners. We'll be players in this to help you grease the wheels a little bit. And
that's why I'm saying, this is Pat Riley's time to shine. Like, he's the guy with the relationships. Yes. The Phoenix Suns don't have those relationships. It's a new owner, relatively new front office. Pat Riley has those relationships.
Andy,
he can reach out.
Andy, I think it's Andy who needs to do this. This is not just Pat. This is Andy.
It's both of them. Yeah, you're right. And I use sort of Pat as sort of the avatar of the front office, but it's Andy Ellisberg and it's Pat Riley doing it together because they have those relationships. And I do wonder, again, do you go from quote unquote open to listening to offers for Jimmy Butler to not necessarily actively shopping him, because they would never word it that way because they don't want to even further belittle their leverage that they have in this situation, but just being at least engaged in the trade market more than a passive sort of bystander in what it is in any phone calls coming in. And so maybe there's something to be done. There's so much more to get into on the Jimmy Butler stuff. I'm sure we're not done with updates. We're not done with news. In between podcasts, great way to keep up with the Jimmy Butler stuff. Sign up to be a part of the Locked On Heat Insider community. You can do that with the link in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your podcast app. It is free for 14 days. It goes to $4.99 a month after that. You're going to get intel from me and David. You're going to get reporting. You're going to get the latest rumors from other people's reporting that you might not have seen. You're going to get an opportunity to interact with us one-on-one and ask questions, and then ask questions for our post-game shows as well. So feels like we've been talking about this for a long time. It also feels like in some ways we're just getting started with this Jimmy Butler stuff, David. So thanks to everybody for tuning in, making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. And thanks extra to everybody who tuned in live on this Friday afternoon. Have a great weekend. We'll be back here on Monday.